Learning about security doesn't need to be scary.
If you want to ship code securely with confidence, check out the URL below and challenge yourself with thousands of challenges in 29 coding frameworks. Let the games begin.
Alrighty, so we'll kick it off. So Frenchie's going to be emceeing this one, and I'm done. So thank you very much for putting up with me all day.
Big round of applause to Luke. There you go. All right, almost at the very end. Congratulations to everyone who's made it this far so far. This is a fascinating panel we have for you. The combined experience here is absolutely breathtaking. I get to sit on stage and ask some wonderful questions, but realistically, the interesting questions always come from the audience. So we do have a Slido, which I don't think we'll show just yet. We'll kick things off, get things warm. But I believe it's Slido AppSec Day 2019. If you look on the Twitters, we have tweeted it out. So please do submit your questions there and we'll ask them because they're always fascinating questions. This is all about audience engagement. And I actually have some hoodies here to give out as well for particularly astute questions. So get thinking. But please, you've had the chance to meet them again, but I'll introduce them just in case. So furthest from me, we have Ken Johnson from GitHub. So Ken has been hacking web applications professionally for 11 years. Ken is both a breaker and a builder and currently works at GitHub on the application security team. Please welcome Ken. Yeah. Right. Next down, you may have noticed her in the wonderfully energetic keynote that we had, Tanya. So Tanya Junker is the co-founder of Security Sidekick, 20 plus years experience, and delivered a wonderful keynote.
Thank you.
Yeah. I do have it on good authority, however, that you passed some of your studies in French. Is that right?
I learned French when I was an adult.
Ah, and when you're an adult, excellent. So from now onwards, the rest of this course will be done in two languages. En français. On va traduire en français en même temps. Et pour les francophones dans la salle, on va raconter n'importe quoi parce que personne ne comprend. There we go. There you go. And then finally as well, sorry, Teri. How's your French, Teri?
Je ne sais pas français. Je suis American.
Perfect, excellent. So,
that's all I know.
Yeah, Teri has helped thousands of companies with their cloud security through consulting, writing, research, and training. She was on the original team that helped Capital One move their production workloads to AWS, and nowadays she offers training, pen testing, and other cloud security services through her company, Second Sight Lab. Please make Teri feel welcome. There you go. Now, the first minor thing I've noticed as well is this is a Southern Hemisphere conference, but they've managed to get everyone from North America so far. My accent, I live in San Francisco these days, so I was tempted to pull Julian up on stage without telling him. Should we do that?
Yes, yes. That's why we have the extra chair.
Come on up, buddy. Yep. That's why we had the fifth chair. Big, come on, mate. There you go. He didn't know we were doing this as well. So this is my sixth sense of humour. Aside from being the token Australian on the panel. Wait. Julian is a very close friend of mine, and so he's done a pretty good job with this conference, hasn't he? Yeah. Yeah? There we go. Excellent. So I don't actually have any questions prepared for you, so you're getting all the ones from the audience. Oh.
We're dead. Oh, here we go. We're on.
There we go, wonderful, excellent. Cool, so first question for the panel. I'll throw them out to individual people, but whoever grabs this one particularly, feel free to answer it, and then just bounce back and forth if people have anything to chime in. My goal is to get us, heated debate, disagreeing on the panel. I think we've all got pretty interesting experience here, and we'll see if we can get the heated argument going. But the first thing, everyone has a little tip and trick, right? The first thing you do with a new organization. A lot of cloud security experience, so let's keep it in that lens. But what's the first thing you do when you join a new organization that is disproportionately effective? First thing you roll out the door.
I always look at web app pen testing and AppSec and all of that, and I know we're supposed to be cloudy, but I just ask for what do all the pen tests and all the scans and everything always find, and then I find the top 3 things, and then I make a lunch and learn about those 3 things and try to knock those things out of the park and be like, yeah, that's why you hired me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any others to add on to that?
I did security at Capital One in the cloud, and I moved to another company where I helped them move to the cloud, and the first thing we did was build the secure pipeline, which is from the ground up, so we could help people be more secure from the start instead of trying to let them go out and build everything and then try to clean up after the fact.
Absolutely. Ken?
So I'd say relationship building was one of the things we always concentrate on first when we start a program, but also like specifically asset collection, like figuring out what we actually own is probably one of the biggest challenges, but it's also super important. Yep. We can't secure what we don't know that we have. So,
absolutely.
If I was to join, say, Capital One, for example, as the director of cloud security, I'd probably check that we weren't breached by SSRF recently.
So, for those who aren't along for the inside joke in the audience, there was a very large breach at Capital One. The full extent of it is mind-boggling.
I'm just going to be the troll on this panel. That's basically my job.
You're going to make me regret pulling you up here, aren't you? Yeah. But interesting, that's a very fascinating segue. As we mentioned, Teri, you spent some time at Capital One. It was not at the time, but it's an interesting sort of insiders-outsider perspective. And Julian, you mentioned SSRF. Is that like, was it just, SSRF, we hadn't thought about it before? Were there other factors that went into that breach? Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that?
I definitely have some thoughts. I was not there. I also want to say that Capital One is a very good company with some very, very good security people. I learned a lot while I was there. But I understand how these things happen. If any of you guys work for a very large company, the security team's not always involved in every decision, or the person, different people make the decision. I heard from people behind the scenes who left a particular department to move to another department after this decision was made. So there was definitely people who are not in agreement. And I was at a security conference. I was speaking at AWS Reinforce, and I was there with some former people I used to work with from Capital One, and they were all talking about SSRF, and I couldn't figure out why. And I found out like a week later.
For the uninitiated, what does SSRF mean?
So, that's a good question. So SSRF, if you go look on the OWASP website and others, they say, well, it's attacking a server and being able to use the permissions on that server to get to something else. And I think for people who aren't necessarily web app people, it's just pivoting, it's getting on a machine and being able to leverage that machine to do something else. And in this particular case, in Capital One, my understanding, and I was told I was pretty much right. I wrote a blog post on this, and someone who was there told me it was pretty accurate. Someone got onto this server. The person actually from my hometown, Seattle, got onto the server, used those credentials, which are way too broad, and then got into the S3 bucket that had all of the applications from like 2015 and was able to exfiltrate those because that WAF server, Web Application Firewall server, had way too many credentials. I wasn't there, but that's my understanding, and I got some feedback that was pretty much accurate. So,
yeah, absolutely.
They should have never let you go. I think that's the key lesson here, right? Yeah.
Just to be clear, like if I was there, it would mean absolutely no difference because they didn't listen to me half the time. So
too humble. Her only flaw. And it's server-side request forgery, because we all just kept saying it's SSRF server-side request forgery, not to be confused with cross-site request forgery, which is totally different.
I was going to say, you shared earlier that you deal with this quite a lot with the bug bounty program at GitHub. Do you want to share a bit about that?
Yeah,
Who's asking the questions here? Jeez.
Yeah, I know, right? It's taking over. No, we actually do deal with SSRF a lot. And the reason is, for us specifically, and probably a lot of organizations face this, we're moving from a large monolith to a more service-oriented architecture. This means there's a lot of microservices and a lot of little applications that have to talk to each other. They have to do that in an authenticated way. If you've ever worked with webhooks on GitHub, you basically know we've got SSRF as a service, right? That's essentially what we're doing. You're pointing us at a URL, and we've got to do that securely, where we're not pointing and talking to our own internal services, but rather whatever server you've pointed us at, and then we have to do that in a secure way. But also, again, like internal to our specific organization, there's a lot of those services talking to each other. So there's a lot of points for people to accidentally code up some part of the app where you can, make a request, force the application to make a request into our internal network you wouldn't normally have access to. The bug bounty is amazing. One thing that we talk about, like Seth Law over there in the audience, he and I do this course. We did it here actually on Secure Code Review. And one thing we talk a lot about is our program. We're pretty focused on like just making sure the kind of the easy to find stuff doesn't exist before it ships out the door, but we really rely heavily on the bug bounty program. I'm glad you brought that up, to find some of the more complicated attacks such as SSRF.
Absolutely. That kind of touches on a really interesting thing. I think bug bounties is a really interesting method of education, and you've seen some interesting stuff in your time there, Ken, in terms of like the different what's the zeitgeist at a different point in time. Can you talk about the sort of stuff that you've seen, because you're very involved with GitHub's bug bounty? What are some of the interesting things that you've seen?
Well, so in the terms of SSRF, go Google forward-chained SSRF vulnerabilities in GitHub. Orange Side's got some good blog posts on there. We see a lot of, more recently, we rely heavily on GraphQL. I don't know if the other panelists, you work too much with GraphQL or the audience, but GraphQL is sort of becoming the, where REST was the thing for APIs, GraphQL is kind of becoming the thing. And we see a lot of interesting authorization-related flaws with GraphQL. And when our bug bounty program, like when we pay out something these days, it's typically for things that are difficult to detect, that are complicated authorization flaws. And a lot of the things we see are either on the REST API or GraphQL, and it's relating to just the sheer amount of different actors essentially that we have to factor in. Everything from your personal access token to an OAuth app to a GitHub app to we have a very complex auth structure. So
there's certainly a lot of content there. It's challenging to keep up with the rate of change. Like there's just so much new stuff. Tanya, in your keynote, you mentioned Mentoring Monday.
Yes.
That's kind of an interesting initiative as a means of transferring knowledge and sharing the skills, and also realizing for the people with 2 years' experience that they might contribute back as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? How that's gone as an education experience?
Okay, Mentoring Monday has been so much more cool than I would have realized that it could be, because everyone in the InfoSec industry is so awesome. So people would write me and ask me to mentor them, and I'm like, oh, you don't want me because I already mentor a few people, and I don't give any of them enough time. And if I add you, that means all of you just get way less mentoring, and that sucks. So at Microsoft, the thing they would always talk to me about is how can we scale you more? And so they'd be like, fly less, write more, or stream more, or do these other things more. And I was like, well, I don't want to like leave people hanging. So I'm like, let's start this Mentoring Monday thing every Monday. And so at first, people only ask to be pen testers. Like 100% of people are like, I just want to be a pen tester. And I'm like, did you know that there's more jobs than that? There's so many important jobs, like in all of IT, but in InfoSec specifically, like we need instant responders. We need people that do forensics and all sorts of investigation types of things. We need people that do AppSec, that do code review, all of the things. And so now people are starting to ask for other things, and it is just, it's really cool. And then people will respond and tell people things. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. Or I'm going to follow that person. Or, ooh, I'm going to buy that book now. So I found it really, really helpful. And so like another thing that I started another hashtag recently, just like 3 or 4 weeks ago, called Security Win. So in question period today, someone was asking like, what types of wins do you share? So I found that sometimes Twitter could be a little negative, or like, oh, it's another breach, or like, oh, I got another email of haveibeenpwned.com. And don't get me wrong, Have I Been Pwned is amazing. Troy is awesome. But what I mean is I don't want to receive emails from him, right? Like, I'm not from his service. I want to have good news, right? And so a lot of us here like doom and gloom. So I started this hashtag, which you can all use whenever you want, or can look at so you feel better. So it's not sarcastic. It's actual wins. So like, oh, we did a pen test and they didn't find anything wrong. Or for instance, like if you happen to have gotten your mom to turn on multi-factor authentication for her bank. But these are like awesome wins, and the more that we share actual positive things with each other, I feel like it can be encouraging for other people, or they didn't even think about that was a thing that you should do. P.S. You should get everyone that you love in your life to turn on MFA on their important accounts. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
I definitely want to come back to positivity, InfoSec burnout, and the impact that has on a bunch of other things. There's a really interesting topic. But just sticking with the education stuff as well, Teri, obviously you run a business that involves lots of training. What do you do personally to stay up to date with the fast-moving stuff that's happening in the cloud space?
It is very difficult, but that's one of the reasons I do training. I'm constantly researching all the cloud providers and how they change and the breaches and trying to adjust the training to what is relevant. So I think some of the lists out there, like top cloud threats, are not really the top cloud threats. I mean, even S3 buckets has moved down the list because people are starting to figure that out and new things are happening. So I'm just constantly researching. I think Twitter is a great resource for following security researchers, things like that. Sign up for the cloud mailing lists if you're into cloud. Whatever topic you're into, there's probably a mailing list for you. So that's what I do.
Interesting. And sticking with formal training as well, for those unfamiliar, SANS is a pretty well-reputed, definitely expensive training institution that usually your work pays for. There is a very limited number of people that if you go to the list of all the courses and scroll all the way down to all achievements unlocked level of SANS, there's a course called GSE. There's 250, 300 people. Teri's one of them. Can you talk to us about that process, what it was like to go through that, and how did you get it?
Sure. I was fortunate enough to go through the SANS master's degree. For a long time, I saw SANS. I had my first breach. I started looking around, researching security. I found SANS, and they seemed to know what they were talking about, and I could never afford the classes. Eventually, I had an employer help me out. I had to pay some of it myself, too. But along the way, you take all the classes, you get a bazillion certs, and at the end, you have to take the GSE. And they've changed it a little bit now, but I was the last group of people that you had to get the GSE to graduate. And so I did it. And I'll just tell you, I wrote a blog post about it. I did not pass the first time. I had some certs expiring, and I thought, I'm just going to take a chance and go try to take it. And I studied for like a month. And the first time I took it, there was 40 people there and 9 passed, just to give you an idea. It's very hard. You have to go take a written exam over 3 or 4 classes, I can't remember, and then you have to go in person and do all this pen testing and blue team and incident handling, all these different things. And so the next time I took it, I knew what I was weak on. I actually do more of it through my business now. I went back and I didn't study at all, and I thought, what am I doing here? I'm going to fail this again. And I passed because I had been doing real-world things. And so that tells you that test is real world. It's not just a book test. It's not just, memorize some questions or something. It's actually real-world things that you do on the job that you get tested on. So it's kind of interesting.
Awesome. Really good answer. I just checked Slido. We're getting some excellent questions rolling in. Some also not excellent questions. You know who you are. He might be sitting in the front row. We'll jump over to that in a quick second. But I want to jump back to the InfoSec burnout and Ken, some of the stuff you mentioned when we were chatting before around the impact that that's having on the free and open source community, maintainers being burnt out, and the security implications of some of that stuff.
Yeah, and Tanya, you were there too. I mean, Tanya spoke at LocoMocoSec, and I'm not sure if you caught Adam Baldwin's talk, where he talked about essentially developer burnout as an attack scenario. It is real. So I think it was we were talking about this earlier. So was it FlatMap we talked about? FlatMap is part of EventStream,
yeah,
where the developer was tired of maintaining the project, and so when somebody came in, this Good Samaritan, I'll take over the project for you. Essentially, the developer was like, sure, that sounds great, and then of course that Good Samaritan put in backdoor, I think it was mining, Bitcoin mining or something like that, I can't really remember, code, and I can't remember, by the way, because there have been so many of these events lately, where it's a supply chain attack. It's developers are tired of maintaining a project, and so they sort of hand it over, and that becomes a bit of an issue, obviously. So there's a couple things, one of the things that we did at GitHub was we have you can retire your namespace. So for instance, some people were realizing, hey, these Golang apps call out to these repos for their packages. And if the organization changes their name and the repo changes like the location, I can just take over and, like claim that namespace and then put out my own package. That's one attack. The whole social engineering I just talked about with FlatMap is another sort of attack. The supply chain attacks are like this whole new vector that we have to contend with. So there is now like this ability with Patreon and these various like sponsorship platforms to sponsor open source maintainers. I do feel like that, I do think it could help. But at the end of the day, like the weirdest thing is when we brought Adam Baldwin, so I had Adam Baldwin as a guest on the podcast, the Absolute AppSec podcast, and I asked him like, do you like all these things that we're doing to prevent these issues? Do you think it matters? And Adam was like, sure, but believe it or not, supply chain attacks, while they have devastating effects, they just aren't that frequent in terms of all the other issues that your development can introduce. And I actually thought a lot about that because I expected him to be like, oh, this is like the sky is falling. And for him to say that, who, if you don't know Adam, he's on like a 4-person team for NPM. He like runs their security program over there. For him
he
to
started the
sort
Node
of,
security project, right?
Exactly. Yeah, to hear him sort of downplay that, it just like really made me think. So I think it's a problem, but I don't know if it's as important as I initially thought it was. Like, I don't know what the other panel, what do you all think about this? I don't have an answer.
I find that most companies are all like, oh, we're concerned about 0 days. I'm like, you don't have basic patching, right? And they're like, oh, we're concerned about like this really obscure, weird, possible security vulnerability, blah, blah, blah. And you're not even checking your third-party components for vulnerabilities. Like, you don't even know how many apps you have. You have like this Excel spreadsheet that was updated 4 years ago. And it's like, oh, that guy quit 3 years ago. And like, there's not even any links anywhere. And you're just like, why are you worried about 0 days? Well, 0 days are cool. Well, I agree. But I don't think that they're high priority. Like,
yeah. I mean, that's basically what he was saying is like, yes, it's a cool attack vector. Yes, it's like super sexy when it hits the news and it becomes a big deal. And it can have like devastating impacts. But statistically, it's not the biggest issue that you need to worry about. It's like asset management and like, preventing the daily vulns that you're shipping, code that you're shipping, right? So, there's a lot of different things you have to worry about.
Yeah, I feel like people should prioritize things like emergency sky is falling and then there's 0 days. Like they're real, they exist, just to be clear. But like the
unicorns of security, though.
So I have another take on that. Just a side note is that I went to a talk from the FBI because I'm involved in InfraGard, and that's in the U.S. That's investigate crimes, cyber crimes included. And the talk was on e-skimming, form jacking, match card, if you guys have heard that. And basically that's what happened to British Airways, where someone got into their code, injected some JavaScript, and it was stealing credit cards. And that's happening a lot, to the point where they're going out into the community and talking about it. And there's 2 primary ways that it's happening. One way is breaking into CMS systems, so your handy-dandy WordPress plugins. The other way is third-party code. And I don't know if this applies to what you're talking about, but people are using all this third-party code off the internet. It could be in advertisements, it could be, what you're talking about. And it drives me crazy when I go to a website and I use Little Snitch in my Mac, and it's like bing, 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 bing. Like they're including 5 million different things. And like, do you look and know that all of those are secure all the time? So I think it could be a bigger problem in one way or another if you're including all these different libraries and code and not putting them on your own repo and calling them from there.
Yeah, if you don't have a lockdown content security policy, probably start there. Yeah, figure out whose code you're including and if it's going to be an issue. And
and if someone swapped that out.
Right, exactly. Like you have no clue. It's crazy. Yeah.
And also, okay, so I know developers aren't going to like this. Try not to boo too loudly. But what if you included like less components? What if you didn't need 57 different libraries?
So,
right? Like, I don't mean to sound crazy, but like we're writing our code from scratch, and guess how many we're using? We're using 3. And we're writing a lot of stuff ourselves, and we're making it because we're two security obsessed nerds. And we're adding a third security obsessed nerd next week. And we're like, if we're going to add it, we're going to be obsessed with that library. But like, I have pen tested so many things where they're like, oh yeah, and that, oh yeah, and that. I'm like, you are calling out to all over the entire internet. Like every single person who wants to can have code in your app. Like, and they're just like, oh, but it's like really cool because there's like this emoticon of like a unicorn that's like sneezing, and then a kitten comes out. I'm like, what are you doing?
Or Guy Fieri images, right, in the node modules folder.
Developers don't worry me so much on that front as much as marketing.
Stinky marketing.
A widget for everything. And it's like, really? You want to send out all that information in refers or include these they popped up overnight marketing sites widgets? Like, that's a huge issue, you know?
Like, if there's... people are like, well, which one should I use? I'm like, okay, so what if you used things from companies that you know are going to be there in 2 or 3 years from now? Who was it, Tony, earlier today? You were talking about that when you were talking about your frameworks. And you're like, I don't want to choose one that's only been around 3 months because it might not be around in 3 months. So for instance, like if you're going to call out to like Google, I am willing to bet money that they still exist in 3 months and 3 years and even longer. But like, there are so many things where it's like, that's just shady. It says shady, like it's clearly shady. And like maybe we could work with developers and talk with them about like, do you really need 566 dependencies in this one-page app? Like, is that really necessary? Just saying.
Thoughts?
I was going to say, tell that to React.js and see how many dependencies they pull in their Facebook, right? So it is hard, right? Because all these companies are still doing exactly that. They're pulling in 1,000 dependencies and you have no idea what's going on there. And I think the other thing is, it's like we went to this whole world of like NPM, and it was really easy to push out a module, and you just write like 4 lines of code and you push a new library to do this one thing because the dev got really angry one day. It was like, oh, I can just do this and then push it up. That's just become like a massive issue. I don't know if it was like this in the day, but like I feel like there was a lot smaller amounts of libraries with more code in them that did more things, whereas now we have lots of smaller things. It's just way too hard to keep track of like all the maintainers, and is this third level dependency trustworthy?
I might jump back in because we're agreeing too much on the panel. I need to seed some discords. I'll take some questions from the audience in the hopes that I can get some tension going on the
There was one in French.
on the panel. There was indeed. Que pensez-vous de SSRF dans le top 10 de l'OWASP?
I will answer in English. So the question was like, what do you think about server-side request forgery going into the OWASP top 10? Okay, so everyone in OWASP, we're like, why are we most famous for this dumb list? We do so many cooler things like this. There's so many other things that we do that are awesome, and we don't know why everyone thinks that's the best thing ever. But anyway, the OWASP Top 10 is a list of 10 things that we think are the most disconcerting that you should look at in regards to web apps. And it is widely regarded as an industry standard. It is not a standard. It is a place to start. But do I think we should put server-side request forgery on it? Yes, because it is in the wild happening like wildfire. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands, if not millions, of developers that are like, oh, I learned the OWASP Top 10. I know all of AppSec now. No, you don't. So we need to put it on there so that millions of more people will pay attention to it. Not because it's necessarily exactly number 10, but because it is just getting exploited so much.
But I just bought a tool that said they cover the OWASP Top 10, so I'm good, right?
Oh, liars. Okay, so you need humans to find a bunch of the OWASP Top 10. And people ask me, they're like, when I was at Microsoft and this company will ask, does your tool cover all the OWASP Top 10? I'm like, I'm not a liar, so no. You have to have a person there to be able to figure out some of the top 10. You just have to. And that's okay. Humans are great. Okay, I'm just going to stop. They didn't even serve booze. The last panel I was on, they served booze in between every question. So
we were debating it's after 5 o'clock. Is it? Are we going to get it? But no. There's a related question.
There's still time.
There is still time.
You guys didn't day drink? I guess I'm alone here. Yeah.
Sorry.
Wonderful community role models we like to bring in front of you today. No. There's another question about OWASP Top 10. Hasn't really changed since it was first released in 2003. What did the security team and industry do in the last 15 years? Julian, what have you been up to?
You personally.
But it is interesting because it is easy to see that as a very pessimistic view, I guess. Like, not the question itself, but that reality of, like, it hasn't changed. And it is true that almost, I don't know, out of the top 10, like 3 has changed? Or, like, not many, right? I don't know, 10 years is a long time, so I can't remember back then. But the world has also become a lot more complex and a lot more fast-paced. So I feel like it's not like it's just been a static, we're still dealing with, like, PHP apps all the time, even though that's, like, majority of the web with, like, WordPress and all that kind of stuff. And also, just on that point, a lot of people don't know that the OWASP Top 10 is backed by a lot of data that gets fed in by, like, lots and lots of different companies, pen testing companies, but also, like, kind of vendors that do static analysis and all these other things. So it's a bit contentious how we get some of the data, not we, but the foundation. And some of that can be skewed, right? So it's kind of like depending on the apps that are getting monitored and all that kind of stuff.
Brian Glass did a lot of work. He's the one who worked on the OWASP SAM. And for this last iteration, he did a lot of work because the first draft came out and everybody was upset because a certain RASP company had some clearly bias towards RASP topics. And then Brian Glass put out a series of blog posts and was like, here's how I think you can fix it. Wasn't accusatory, didn't place blame, just said, here's the data I think you should be pulling from. And then they did a lot of work to fix that. So that first release, that draft was not great. It was pretty much shit. And then Brian stepped in and really helped make it, like, based on real information.
The first draft only had data from one company.
Yeah.
Like, that's the first problem. But most companies are not willing to share such sensitive data. But also, I think we need to ask ourselves, so you know the whole thing about correlation does not necessarily mean causation. And we tell pen testers, go look for these 10 things. And they're like, I found those 10 things. We didn't say, look for these 100 things. And they're like, I only found these 10 things.
Yeah, number 11 doesn't count.
Yeah, no, but we're so biased. Like, we've been feeding our industry that these are the most important things. So, of course, those are the things that they're looking for. Like, when I first became a pen tester, I was like, ooh, like, I found this other thing, but it's not from OWASP, but I don't... And my mentor said, throw it out. Yeah, I got a new, better, smarter mentor who was, like, more advanced.
Was it from Mentoring Monday?
No, it wasn't from Mentoring Monday. No, this was like a million years ago before that. But I did find my current mentor from Mentoring Monday. I, like, tweeted it to her and was like, will you be my mentor? She's like, you didn't have to start all this just to ask me, girl.
I think the top question there is going to be a great one. Teri, I might start with you on this. What has been your biggest asterisk? Is this, or are we allowed to swear on stage?
Just do
They're
it.
not filming. So
They're not filming? Okay.
Yeah, just do it.
What's your biggest fucking shit moment in your career regarding security?
Oh, man, I didn't think about that.
Julian, you can't say working with me.
Okay, this is not recorded, so... Friendier.
Yeah. Chatham House rules.
you're all friends now.
Yeah.
And I think there's someone here from Capital One, so Friendier. So when I was at Capital One, I was working on the security, or on the team that built all the networking for all the developers, and I saw many bad things, people learning. But my boss came to me and he said, you're going to help build One Cloud. And I was like, was that like a song like Bob Marley, like One Love? I thought he was joking. And he explained to me that it was this project where we were going to let developers build their own networking and build this tool to build their own networking. And I was like, man, I don't know. So I tried to get the security team involved, and I was supposed to work with this other team, and I kind of backed away from it, got out of it. And then they came and they let that team build all the networking. And I said, okay, I'm going to give you a network range to work within, right? And they came in and they said, okay, they started building, and they basically like wiped out all of our IP ranges. And it's not specifically a security problem, but they just basically exhausted all the IP ranges in an entire account. And apparently they still talk about that project at Capital One. So I was kind of glad I backed away from it, but that was kind of a scary moment.
Yep.
So mine was when I was socially engineered. So big vendor, who I won't name. I was going to a hacker summer camp for the first time, and I don't know if you know, but it's like a gabillion men, and then there's like 4 women there, and I'd never been to security, and I was just like, And
I would say it's a lot better these days as well.
it is better. So this was before it was better, and it's still not good. No, it's not. It's awful.
Fair.
I have to go because I get paid money and I get to speak at DEF CON, so I have to go. It's my job. But I wouldn't go. I would come here. Hands down, every single... No, I'm not kidding. Every
job,
single
Julian.
time, I would definitely, anytime. OWASP is, if you want to learn stuff, you want to have a good time, but not get completely shit-faced and debaucherous, it's OWASP. Like, respect,
Look, you
I
kind of did
didn't
like
go
a
and she
shitty
took
job
our
this
talk.
morning, so you're not invited. Right?
Okay, but anyway,
From
I'm
the
sorry.
panel that was talking about drinking. In front
I
of you
love
before.
OWASP.
did say
I'm
you're
really
trolling.
sorry. I get like really passionate. Okay, so but basically, this company had there was this big request for proposals from the Canadian government for this thing that was we were going to pay like millions and millions and millions of dollars for this. And this company's like, hey, you're coming down, blah blah blah. Do you want to come have like this dinner with us, and then you can go to our super famous party that we have, and like we'll hang out. It'll be great because you don't know anyone. And I'm like, awesome, I'll come down. Like, you know, like thinking they wanted to be my friend. And so there was no dinner, but they kept serving me booze. And after a certain point, one of them reached, like he went, he's like, what do we need to do to win that proposal? And all of a sudden it like clicked. I'm like, there never was dinner. They kept saying the food was coming. They kept serving me, and like they brought me into this court and it was like, oh fuck. I was like, I have to go. Now I'm like, stumble away. And then I called my boss in Canada and I was like, I just did something that I think might be bad. Like I didn't tell them anything. I was like I think I just like kind of ran away all awkward like because I'm really good at that. Yeah, and I told my boss, they still won the RFP.
That's fucking gross.
I know, it was really gross. I've had there's a place that gives certifications and they called me and offered me a bribe to recommend to the government that they take their certification, and they're like, yeah, and we'll put your name on a cert. I'm like, oh, I get to take the exam for free, and they're like, we don't give a shit. Like, we'll just put your name on it. They're very well known. Yeah, and guess what I did? I reported myself for being in an inappropriate situation, and my boss was like, what do you do with yourself? This shit happens to you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anybody could fall into that, though, pretty easily.
I feel
Yeah.
so stupid, like being plied with alcohol too, because I'm like, oh, I'm not like that big of a person, and like it just like I was
Well,
like,
the fact it's that common, like alcohol is that common at like conferences, it probably wouldn't feel that weird for you, you know, at first. I don't know. Super creepy.
but I felt that was a big security mistake of me being the breach in security, like or almost being it. Like I was all of a sudden like, shit. Yeah, seriously.
Ken?
Yeah, sorry. That's
No. It's a heavy
crazy.
story. Yeah.
He's like, I've never effed up like that.
No. I've never had someone try to do that to me. So, yeah, for me, I guess it's like, because, so I just talked about like, oh, the bug bounty, you know, is supposed to catch the hard stuff. And what we do is we have a very small window. We try and find kind of the easy to find stuff, the big stuff. And, having said that, there's a little bit of a dichotomy because when a severe or critical bug bounty comes in and it's on something I reviewed, I'm like totally insecure enough to feel completely shitty about it.
Yeah.
And I think that those moments, those moments are the ones that I still struggle with, even though I know like, hey, I only had like a small window to do just kind of a blanket review. But those are the ones that freak me out the most. I do care about people's data, do want to keep it secure. So anytime somebody finds something I didn't, I still struggle with that. It's going to happen. It's going to happen to anybody, no matter how good you are. You just have your time limits and restrictions, but like it still doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's interesting because do you find that the more big bugs you get exposed to, the less of an oh shit moment it is these days? It's kind of, oh yeah, cool, that's happened. Because I feel like when I first started out pen testing, the example I was going to give is like when I was pen testing like a mobile app, very early days, it was like found this kind of authentication bypass, pretty big institution, like it was pretty fresh into the industry as well. I was like, oh my God, I've just like found this thing. It's like, oh, that was like the biggest oh shit moment. And then from then on, it's like every month or two, you still have these oh shit moments when you get a P1 going through the bug bounty program, or like you find something internally, like, oh crap, quick. But it's not as bad as like some of those initial ones that I was exposed to.
We've got some amazing questions. We only have 10 minutes left. Brianna, can you raise your hand? Who else got it? Wonderful. One of these is for you. That was an excellent question. Come down and say hi afterwards. I won't throw it. My aim is not that good. But I might go rapid fire through some of these other questions, and maybe whoever wants to jump in and grab them. I'm going to ignore that question. Actually, I'm genuinely curious. You've got 40 people in the audience. So is that someone's bot, or is... Ignore it, sorry.
When is the... we can't see that one.
Yeah, no, they've intelligently censored it because it's a very stupid question.
Is it the duck one?
It's the duck.
Oh, okay.
I'm
I didn't
ducking
know,
the
are
question.
there more types than one duck? Like, I'm just like, look, it's a duck.
Roasted duck's my favorite
Yeah,
duck.
oh my God.
Calm down, Liam.
Duck
calm
à
down.
l'orange.
The biggest oh shit moment in my career is when I was on stage and they kept asking fucking duck questions. So whoever wants to grab this one, what are your top tips for self-care to avoid burnout and mental health issues for security professionals? Anyone want to grab that lighthearted, cheery one?
I can grab it, or you can,
Yeah.
whichever.
I want you to grab it.
Okay, so for me, I do yoga twice a week. I do jiu-jitsu like 5 times a week. I work out in a gym twice a week. And basically that physical exertion is how I get to sleep, because I have a brain that won't let me sleep if I don't completely wear myself out physically. So that's basically how I do it. I just do a lot of physical activity, and that's the only way I can sort of like... Also, if you've never done anything like jiu-jitsu or martial arts, it's a good way to stay in the moment. So anything... period that allows you to stay in the moment and not think about anything else, you should do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I quit my job. I don't think that's advisable for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's like a good coping mechanism.
But if you're in a bad situation, getting out of a bad
So
situation...
you're saying
can absolutely
start a
help.
business
Yeah.
to avoid burnout.
Excellent. Another good one. How do you structure the info and learnings from an incident to drive rich context sharing with everyone in the company with the intent to drive wider learning?
Ooh, I got this one.
Yeah.
So, like a lot of companies, I talk about this a little bit actually, but with our bug bounty program, I don't know if I'm going to get exactly, like the incident, it's not really an incident specifically if it's come through the bug bounty program. It's slightly different, right? Obviously you have a breach where you actually know there was a malicious attacker somewhere in your network or that has exploited something versus a researcher from a bug bounty program or a external pen test. Those kind of scenarios are a bit different. But making that kind of learning as public as possible within the company, especially if you can do it within the culture of the company, and work on that as a security culture thing. So basically, at Seek at least, we have pretty open bug bounty channels in Slack and that kind of thing to get that learning from happening with the developers and anyone interested. That's been working really well for us.
Cool. Anything to add?
Lunch and learns. That's how I learned I was good at speaking. This lunch and learns. I'm like, I just want them to know this stuff, and I'm just going to be awkward at them at lunchtime. Turned out they liked it.
Excellent. We have a question from Theckman, which I think might be T. Heckman. But from Theckman, no, that was that question that we just had. So the other jumper, who's Theckman? Wonderful. The other one's for you. Running down, JG. Our industry often likes to use shock tactics to raise awareness. This can lead to information being ignored. How do you raise awareness effectively?
Scream louder.
I have an answer to that. I tried to relate it to business, losing money and the impact of that. And you can't do it too long or too much, but I think it's still effective when you tell businesses and relate it to their bottom line. And you say, look, there's this breach, it cost them XYZ dollars, but then also turn around and say, here's how to fix it. And that's why I'm actually writing a book for executives right now, and it's focused on explaining things from an executive or business point of view, not a super technical point of view. And I'm saying, hey, here's what you should ask your security team, but it's actually what the security team wants them to do. So it's kind of like, psychology there. But I think relating it to dollars and cents and things that matter to business people will be helpful.
Making it fun. There's so many ways you can make things be fun. Like, it's fun to break a thing and then see how to fix it. Like, my first lunch and learn was I'm going to break into a bank at lunch. Does anyone want to come watch? And my friend had made this vulnerable bank app. And then when I showed them, I like made them do it. I'm like, okay, so behind this is some SQL. So like, how would we, and I made them slowly give me the answer and I kept failing. I'm like, oh, that didn't work. Let's try this. Oh, good. There's a verbose error message. And then when we finally got it, everyone was just like, yeah. But I don't know, I just show things that I think are fun, and sometimes people agree.
For us, bug bounties are amazing in the sense that like we get the hack without the like headline. So we can, for instance, the second quarter of this year, we put out a brown bag, which was like, here are in the last year the most impactful, like insane, cool bug bounty submissions that came in. These are things where like we had to have cert go and like make sure we weren't actually hacked. And it's like really nice because it's a really impactful. Developers love seeing this real world stuff. And at the same time, like I said, we don't end up on the news, right? So really a win from that standpoint. Yeah, it is. Oh, and we are talking to Secure Code Warrior to see if there's a way to like build in some of these things that happened into challenges. So yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Just to add to the existing content. So.
Sweet. I'm going to scroll down and get some of the long tail of comments because you're all still voting for the stupid duck question. So there's kind of a couple of related ones, which is how did you all get your start in InfoSec? And then there's another kind of related one. It's like, what's the fastest way for a new dev transitioning from a non-software engineering background to become savvy? Both really good questions. Yeah.
So I've written like a gabillion blog posts on this topic and then answered it in a podcast a million times. But that's why I started Mentoring Mondays, so that you could have a hand up. There's also, I suggest following people online. So I talked about this, I think, earlier. But if there was like a talk that you really liked, follow that person. Watch all their stuff, read their stuff, follow us, and then I will retweet someone, and you might be like, that person's cool, follow them, etc. Read their work, right? Like, take some time. So finding the first job can be quite hard. What you need is someone to advocate for you. And if you find a mentor, they might advocate for you. If you make friends and network. So I don't mean show up one time and be like, give me a job. That is repulsive. And I don't mean like as a word to insult you. I mean like that repulses people and makes them not want to work with you. So if the first time you meet someone, you ask them for something. So instead, try to show value. When I joined OWASP, I was just like, this is amazing. And I was like, can I organize a CTF? Because I've heard of them on the internet, and I've always wanted to go to one. And they're like, yeah. And I just kept offering value. So then when I was like, oh, I need a reference, everyone was like, obviously, of course. Right? And it hadn't even occurred to me that I was building up all this social capital. So you can prove yourself in all sorts of different ways and give back to people, and that person will come and advocate for you. Or if you're lucky, they'll just do it. That's more rare.
All right, I think we've got time for one last question. I'm going to, Hail Mary one that I think may get some disagreement on the panel, maybe, because we've just been agreeing the whole time.
It's the duck question, isn't it?
What's that? It's the duck, yeah. No, I think actually we'd still agree on that one, unfortunately. AWS versus Azure versus GCP, how would you rate the three in terms of security maturity? Pick your favorite child.
Well, you already asked Teri and I this earlier today.
Oh, really?
I didn't really answer this. I can answer this with my opinion. I research all three clouds very heavily in my class, and I have like charts that show like here's the features each one has. And I think they all have pros and cons. I think they're definitely, I had a Google person in my last class, and I said, how do I do this in Google, the networking? Oh, yeah, you can do that, you can do that. Came back, still don't have an answer. So I think there's some network issues with Google, personally. I think AWS and Azure are close, but just so there's more Azure downtime. I think Azure has some good features in terms of their dashboards, like what Tanya loves, and they are also the first ones to get packet capture. It's not inline, but it's still there. But I vote for AWS, personally. It's to me.
As the least mature?
What?
AWS is the least mature?
No, as the most secure.
Ah, damn it, okay.
Most secure.
Thought we had something there. No.
Yeah, I think they've just been doing this longer.
Yeah.
I think To be honest, right now I think Google's moving the fastest, except they've got a roadblock with their networking. But I see them releasing the most security features. I do love Azure Security Center, and I think they have a really awesome dashboard, and they look really good, from that perspective. But I just feel like under the hood, there's some stuff I like about AWS better still so far.
Plus, AWS has security conferences now, like AWS security-specific conferences.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think that brings us to 6 o'clock, and unfortunately I couldn't get a disagreement on the panel for you. They're all just... Actually, yeah, sorry. We ran out of time. So there is another question, which is, where is the after party? So maybe we can continue the argument.
I will be doing the keynote.
There is a closing ceremony. So thank you all so much. Please thank our wonderful panelists for their time.